Absolutely. I think that's a great question. There definitely are a lot of differences, and if I were to focus on the advantages, and speaking more from the leverage point of software and technology, which is really what we invest in, is I'd probably say 3 points. One would be creativity, the use of new technologies, social networks, mobile phones, and the third would be a need that is different in developing markets versus developed markets. So just going a little bit deeper into those three, creativity in software is fundamental for innovative products. And you have a lot of human capital here that is very skilled. I mean, you have some of the best companies in antivirus. A lot of the professionals are out of Brazil. A lot of the very compelling or very well-known professionals in Red Hat, open source also come from Brazil. So there's a lot of raw talent. But where they lack sometimes is more of the structure, more of the way in which they can build products with a larger group and so forth. So, but the creativity of professionals from here, and I've worked with companies with Israeli professionals, with Indian professionals, with American professionals. I think when you find the right professionals, they're very, very, I mean, they're very compelling and they do a great job. The second point is the usage of new devices, new technologies such as mobile phones. I mean, I think it's well known that a lot of the innovative mobile phone technologies and mobile applications is taking place more in Africa and the Philippines and to some extent in Brazil. And if you look at Facebook users and so forth per capita, I mean, Brazil is a very, it's above the curve in terms of how much the people actually use those technologies. So it's, I mean, thinking especially of those two areas, which are areas around our investment thesis, the usage and the understanding of how these technologies can be levered toward a business that is starting around them. Actually, that's another very important component. And I think another point in which Brazilian professionals can be, or businesses can be a differential is also that needs in developing markets and developed markets are very different. I mean, for example, one of our investment theses is cloud software applications. And in the United States, one of the dynamics about cloud applications is that they have to be self-service. The professional has to be, or if you have a company that's going to use the cloud application, they have to understand how to use it by themselves. And in Brazil, it's not always that easy. So you need, A, to have a more simple application, B, to have channel partners that help to lever your application into the market. So in essence, for developing markets, and we look at a lot of companies that start in Brazil, but they can go to Mexico, to China, to India, is essentially you can lever from that understanding and being creative if you combine the three aspects that I mentioned, being creative, being resourceful in new technologies, and putting in a simpler way to the developed or developing markets. Yes, that is one of our theses. It's not the only one. I mean, many times we find investment theses that work well within Brazil. But oftentimes we do find that technology is well applied in Brazil at scale. You could eventually take into other countries as well. And I think that's what a lot of the venture capital industry in Brazil is striving for. A lot of the investors are thinking and looking for those diamonds in the rough that could eventually become compelling technologies globally. Well, I guess one point is that you have to find companies that address a large enough market where you can get to that scale. So obviously vis-a-vis the United States market, where a lot of markets, even though they're niches, they can reach the significant scale, you have less niches like that in Brazil because it's a relatively smaller market. And so I think finding the market spaces in which you could become a dominant player, or we could back a company to become a dominant player in a market that is large enough, there's less of those opportunities to scale. So it's just a matter of choosing your fights, if you will, or picking the winners to the right races, I guess, would be one way to put it. Another component is also management. Even though my snapshot was from 2001, the bubble years in Brazil, what entrepreneurs were like, and today what they're like, and they're light years ahead. I mean, they really have evolved a lot during that time frame. Still, there's a long way to go. I think especially in having more operational diligence, being more focused on the metrics. You see some entrepreneurs that are out of out of the scales in terms of how well they execute on those dimensions. But oftentimes too, you need to help them get to that point as an investor. And that is a trend, or that is a need that's being addressed at some point by the foreign nationals that are coming in here. So you have people from the United States, from Germany, from a lot of different countries that are coming here with that sort of diligence. And oftentimes they are brought into companies, and you mix, the skills from the Brazilian entrepreneur that knows the local nuances with a lot of those metric focus and operational skills and so forth. So I think management is one of the big questions, but the curve that the country is going through right now is phenomenal. So hopefully, if it continues, we'll be at par. And I guess just another point would be the regulatory environment, especially when you're in an early stage environment. You have to think about bureaucracy and a lot of things that are harder for you to launch a company. I had the good fortune of launching a company here in the United States, and it's just, if you're the CEO of a company, I guess one rough way to put it is that here you have to spend maybe 30–40% of your mental bandwidth thinking about these issues of regulatory and taxes and this and that. Whereas in the United States, it's simple. It's simple and quick to launch a company, and maybe you spend 10% of your time in these issues. So it just allows you, it frees up more of your time there vis-a-vis in Brazil, and those things are changing too. So that's another dimension in which startups could have an easier time to grow and not have to worry about these things, the regulatory aspects. Absolutely. I mean, the venture capital and private equity, having seen a lot of companies go through issues, can help the entrepreneurs really go through and handle these issues that are kind of some of the hurdles that you have in the regulatory environment. I mean, there's one saying which is, to be an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley is tough. I mean, it's tough. You have to align. The stars have to align for you to really make it big. To be successful in Brazil, it's particularly tough. It's very tough also because you have all these regulatory dimensions. I mean, even if you think back 2001, 2002, I guess for you to be an entrepreneur, you had to be a little bit crazy too, because the odds were really not stacked in your favor. So you really had a lot of odds you had to go against. So yes, we as investors tend to help the entrepreneurs to really navigate the environment, particularly if he's a young professional. I mean, one of our portfolio companies is Ingress. He's a very an outstanding entrepreneur that came out of Stanford with a master's degree, 23 years old. And we helped a lot, what essentially he had to get around in terms of, okay, the regulatory aspects, the tax aspects, the getting your office established aspects. So we end up really getting involved with all those aspects as well.